It had been more than 40 years since Anne Marie Allen lived and worked at Ballyglennon Park, but she still took the servants' driveway up to the house. On March 16th, 2024, at 6:31 UTC, the Financial Times, a little newspaper that you might have heard of, published an article titled "The Opus Dei Diaries" by Antonia Cundy, how girls around the world were coerced into decades of grueling service to a secretive Catholic group. This topic brings me no joy. It has never brought me joy, but from the moment that I first learned about assistant numeraries and about the hell that they are put through in this organization, I felt compelled to do everything that I can to amplify their experiences and shed light on the truth of what this organization is. I have done that through many different videos at this point over the course of several years. And so while this is not a joyful occasion, there is something curiously vindicating about the fact that the discussion around this organization's alleged crimes is finally gaining enough momentum to attract the notice of a publication as well recognized and read as the Financial Times. That is significant, and I don't think that it can be overstated. Change and progress and awareness are extremely slow in coming to the fore, particularly when it meets the type of opposition that an organization as well off as Opus Dei is able to put up. However, with every single story that comes out, there is a growing volume of damning evidence against what I consider to be one of the most predatory and opportunistic religious organizations in the world. For my own part, this channel has and always will be focused on exposing the truth, one video at a time, and when necessary, amplifying the voices of those who have been silenced for far too long. Anne Marie Allen, Tina Fogarty, and Monica Espinoza are part of a growing body of women from around the world who are stepping out and speaking candidly about the abuse, neglect, and mistreatment that they experienced while in servitude to one of the most powerful religious organizations in the world. Their courage and integrity are exemplary, and I stand with them in solidarity. My name is Rebecca Griffin. I'm an independent journalist, and this channel is an archive of my work, which for the last several years has been focused on discussing Opus Dei, their questionable, unethical, and outright illegal practices, their absurd preoccupation with targeting young people for recruitment, and their interesting and somewhat concerning connections to a number of key political, religious, and economic figures from around the world. Now, you may be tempted to think that this situation doesn't apply to you because you're not Catholic or you were never in Opus Dei, but I would beg you to reconsider and to take the time to, if not listen to this video, at least read through my sources and listen to the experiences of the people who have come out. And so with that said, welcome to the Deep Dive Project.
The Catholic organisation Opus Dei, the work of God, has found itself the focus of some unwelcome attention this past week.
There are serious charges made in Tina's account of forced servitude or modern slavery and coercion, and that's not the case, actually.
I would have been told, I was very special and I had a calling and I had this vocation to be an assistant numerary.
This one particular numerary focused a lot of attention on me, and I took it to mean that she actually cared about me and I felt seen.
We're very, very interested in having everyone find the place that's best for them in Opus Dei. So there's no caste system.
This is your vocation and you can only be an assistant numerary, and your vocation is to serve.
Nobody should be forced to do anything against their will. Nobody should be coerced into having a vocation.
I knew there was an emphasis on religion, but I didn't know they were an organization per se until the love bombing and the coercion started.
You just did it because if you didn't do it, it would just, the guilt would just eat away at you.
I had no idea really what it meant. I did it because this pressure was being put on me. You have a vocation, you need to ask to join. We had prayers and mass, cleaning, cooking, more cleaning, cooking, laundry, 3 meals a day.
How many days a week would you do that? Pretty much 7 days a week.
Even after becoming an official member, I never received any payment.
How much did you get paid for that work? I never got any money. I know some people have said they would have received. I never had a penny on me.
And keep in mind that these assistant movies were recruited as children. That was my childhood. And many, many childhoods. And it's women. It's women again.
There are many assistant numerarians across the world living lives quite similar to the one I have explained. I feel that these women's human rights are severely breached by the attitudes and rules of Opus Dei. However, Opus Dei continues to justify and allow this type of status to exist. It can only be described as a serious exploitation of a vulnerable group of women in the name of God.
It's actually abuse. That's what it is. It's child abuse. You're taking somebody's like it's emotional and it's physical as regards the actual morning to night working, and there's no other word for it really. It's child abuse.
While we recognise that Margaret may have had a bad experience and that there are situations for which we must apologise, we categorically deny the allegation of exploitation.
Please ponder on the words of the Bill of Human Rights, Article 7. No one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. Article 8. No one shall be held in servitude. So today we are going to be going over the Financial Times article, some of the thoughts that I have concerning everything that is presented here, as well as some of the subsequent media that has come out following its publication, including Opus Dei's response to it, which has been interesting, but we will get to that. If you were to print this article out, it would be over 30 pages long. It is lengthy and comprehensive, and after reading through it, the themes that emerged for me are those of manipulation, love bombing, lying, and coercion. Serious issues that need to be discussed and addressed. Because the article is so lengthy, I won't be reading it in its entirety here, so if you have not had a chance yet to read through it yourself, there are 2 links down in the description of this video, along with all of my other sources. The first link will take you to the Financial Times itself with the article. It is behind a paywall, but if you are in a position to be able to support good journalism, I would ask that you consider doing so, because this type of work is extremely important and it does come at a cost. It's not easy to do. However, I don't want a paywall to be the reason why someone does not get access to this information. And so the second link is for an archived version of the article, and you can access that and share it as many times as you want to. And I would ask that you please do so. I've highlighted some points that I want to focus on, and the article jumps around a little bit from each individual woman's experience as well as an overview of the organization as a whole. So we'll just go through it in the order that it's presented here, going over the thoughts that I have. So the article states that today Opus Dei has 95,000 members worldwide, and while that number has been contested by individuals who were in the organization and have since left within the last 5 to 10 years, it is no secret that some of these members are highly influential people. In the US, for example, the Catholic Information Center, which is an event space run by Opus Dei, claims that its chapel is, quote, the closest tabernacle to the White House, and its supporters have been central to the conservative takeover of the US judiciary. If you would like to know more about Opus Dei's involvement in US politics specifically, I have a whole video about that on my channel, and you can go and find it. Beyond that, though, high-profile Opus Dei members elsewhere include the late Louis Valls, the former president of Banco Popular, Patrick Jorge, current governor of the Central Bank of Kenya, and Guillermo Lasso, the president of Ecuador until last year. The elite standing of its membership has fueled speculation about the group's influence in business, education, and politics. And while people, including Opus Dei itself, have downplayed the significance of this point, I would argue that it should be scrutinized a bit more closely than it actually is, because in politics and economics and religion on a global scale, networking is the name of the game. I think everybody knows that, and if you don't, you should acquaint yourself with that fact. And when you are wealthy enough to own whole countries, the decisions that you make have the potential to impact the lives of millions of innocent people. And so the people that you associate with, the organizations that you give money and time to, and the ways that you spend your time do matter. When you are a civil servant, you lose a little bit of that right to privacy in the interest of honesty. At least that's the way that it should be. We know, of course, that that's not always the reality. And I have talked quite a bit about Opus Dei's involvement in geopolitical affairs. And if you are interested in any of that, you can go and find those videos. But I have long felt that if you really want to know the character of an organization, all you really need to do is look at how they treat the people that they consider to be the lowest men on the totem pole. And in Opus Dei, that is the assistant numeraries. These are women who give their lives to the organization as domestic workers. In many cases, it has come out that they have done so without pay and against their will. Anne Marie and the other women in this article were of a group of more than a dozen former assistant numeraries that Antonia Cundy spoke to, who worked as unpaid domestic servants for Opus Dei from 1977 to 2020 across Europe, the US, Africa, and Latin America. They were recruited as young girls from rural and working class backgrounds on the premise of receiving an education. But the women said they were coerced into domestic servitude, in effect, modern slavery, through a rigid system of psychological control. The outstanding question on everyone's minds: how did an organization of people trying to lead virtuous lives end up causing so much harm, and to children, no less? In my opinion, the situation with the assistant numeraries clearly establishes Opus Dei's entire strategy of recruitment, but which really actually feels more like kidnapping, and exposes it for what it really is: labor trafficking. The story is consistent regardless of the continent in which the individual was living at the time. People are manipulated into committing to something under entirely false pretenses at an inappropriately young age, and all but strong-armed into submission. And upon exiting the organization, with few exceptions, they essentially flee in the dark of night with nothing but the clothes on their backs and maybe their passport if they are lucky. Opus Dei specifically targets young women from economically disadvantaged backgrounds who are eager for an opportunity to make something of themselves, to further their education, or to just get out of their difficult home lives. It occurred to me that an environment that fosters abuse and harbors abusers creates people who are handicapped from believing in and exercising their bodily autonomy. And so in many cases, these girls go from the frying pan right into the fire when they leave difficult situations at home, as was the case for Tina Fogarty, and go and enroll in these educational centers under the premise of getting an education. The article delves into Opus Dei's preoccupation and infatuation with the person of Father Jose Maria Escriva. Of course, in Opus Dei, there is only our Father, one Father, and this kind of disgusting idolization of a mortal man is, in my opinion, the mark of a zealot and a red flag. No human being should be placed up on a pedestal to where their actions can't be questioned and their intentions scrutinized, and yet that is exactly what has happened in this situation. Escriva founded Opus Dei in Spain in 1928. It came out of an incredibly tumultuous time in Spanish history following the Spanish Revolutionary War. And he believed that it was not necessary for people to enter a convent or monastery to commit themselves to faith. They could be lawyers, teachers, or civil servants and still attend their life with transcendent significance, and Opus Dei would show them how. On the face of it, as I have said nearly from the beginning, this doesn't necessarily sound like a bad idea. There are lots of people, Catholic and otherwise, who would be very attracted to that idea, and it's a very nice ideal. But the reality is this system of rigid rules, invasive behavior, and intense scrupulosity. And it seems to me that it would be entirely impossible to live up to this idea that Escriva created without living in cloister in a monastery or a convent. And that would completely defeat the goal of Opus Dei in the first place, which was supposed to be to make saints of ordinary people leading everyday lives. And so this is the result, this constipated, disorganized institution that perpetuates the abuse of people who enter in good faith. The article notes that Anne-Marie had never heard of Escriva before arriving at her catering college in County Galway, Ireland. I would imagine that the majority of these young girls, unless they came from Opus Dei backgrounds already, had never heard of Escriva prior to getting to their assignments. And I had never heard of Escriva prior to stumbling upon this entire situation back in 2020. And I was raised in a very, very Catholic household with a huge emphasis on the lives of the saints and on catechesis and faith formation. And I think that just goes to show that for all of the pomp and circumstance that is kind of paid to Escriva by people in Opus Dei, to the rest of the world and really to the rest of the Catholic culture as a whole, the man is simply unimportant to the overall historic topography of the church. I mean, God rest his soul, but he simply did not manage to achieve the kind of recognition and clout that I think he was hoping to. And now he is on the brink of being remembered as the founder of an organization so corrupt that it would make Marcial Maciel chuckle. Speaking to Tina Fogarty's experience, the article says that Tina's father approved of the all-girls residence where she was sent, particularly when he learned that there was a Catholic chapel on site. The advertisement in which they learned about this school made no mention of Opus Dei. Montero, one of the women who ran the center, soon asked Tina to join her for walks and prayers and filled them with stories about Escriva. She spoke in an accent Tina had never heard before, her broken English peppered with Spanish. The founder was called Our Father, Montero explained, because God had shown him the need for a new family within the church. It was important that all Opus Dei centers felt like homes too. Escriva believed that required a woman's touch. Opus Dei centers are strictly segregated by sex. Locations are chosen for their ability to conceal the administration from the male residents with separate entrances, dividing walls, and double-locked internal doors. According to Opus Dei's internal guidelines at the time, the men and women were not to speak to each other, see each other, or know each other's names. Once again, the playbook is clear. Deceit, manipulation, and gaslighting are all perfectly acceptable measures to take. That is a fact Opus Dei reinforces over and over, even as they attempt to save face in the aftermath of a truly scathing expose. These women are not geriatric, senile, and confused, which is no doubt what Opus Dei would prefer. To the contrary, they are succinct and articulate and damning in their honesty. And I do not see how any rational individual could doubt this testimony, particularly in the light of all of the other historic journalism that has been done on this topic for a number of years at this point. The article goes on to say that despite the fact that no one was supposed to know anyone's names, in reality, the girls knew the men's names from the embroidered tags in their underwear, which they washed and delivered back to their rooms. The perfect administration, Opus Dei's internal guidelines stated then, is neither seen nor heard, which is just classism at its finest, and very incompatible with the kind of world that I want to live in. Now, at this point, the article starts to get into some of the kind of rigid thought and behavior controls that the organization exerted over the girls in these centers. It says that one evening, when a girl from Dublin put the Village People's YMCA on the record player, one of the directors tore into the room and cracked the disc over her knee. This song is obscene. It's encouraging teaching people to be sinful, the director admonished. Tina preferred to try to please the women who ran the school. Montero's attention in particular dazzled her. She gave Tina little presents, the last thimbleful of her scent bottle, or chocolates, normally reserved for the silver platters they left out in the men's residence. Tina loved to walk beside her, marveling at her silk scarves and pearls. It was on these walks that Montero began to apply pressure to Tina to consider her vocation to join. She asked Tina where she saw her life going, and she said she wasn't sure, but she thought she'd like to have a good job and a family. And Montero's response was, "Oh, that's not so noble, is it? You need to open your heart and listen to God, Tina. I think you might have a vocation. Wouldn't you like to do something greater with your life?" Because, as we know by this point, there is no life worth living except the one that Opus Dei assigns to you, and Opus Dei has the final say on whether or not that life is the correct one for you. You have no control or autonomy over that choice. And of course, what could be greater than unpaid servitude? Circling back to the note about how they reacted to secular media, this made me think of religious OCD, also called scrupulosity, and I decided to pull up some information about it because it's not really something that I know a whole lot about, and I will leave some links down below for anyone who's interested in reading up more about it. But this article that I pulled up here says that religious OCD, or scrupulosity, is a subtype of obsessive compulsive disorder where a person experiences obsessions and compulsions that fixate on religion or morality. Treatment can involve medication, therapy, or a combination of both. Examples of obsessions would be the fear of going to hell or being punished by God, being overly moral, fear of having committed a sin, constantly striving for purity, fear of the loss of impulse control, fear of death, doubting what a person feels or believes, fear of being possessed, and a need to acquire certainty about religious beliefs. Examples of compulsions include excessively praying, repeatedly seeking reassurance from religious leaders, making pacts with religious deities, excessive confession of perceived sins, repeatedly performing cleansing rituals, writing prayers to check that they're done correctly, making mental efforts to erase or replace bad thoughts, acts of self-sacrifice, and repeating passages from sacred scriptures in the head or out loud. All of those examples are manifest in the experiences that people say that they had while they were in Opus Dei, and it's incredibly concerning. Anne-Marie was coerced into sending a letter requesting to join Opus Dei, or whistling as it's referred to within the organization, while she was on a trip to Rome. On that trip, she applied for a passport and tasted blood orange and gelato for the first time. When the women who ran the retreats allowed them a break, they often took one girl for a walk. It was on one of those strolls that Anne-Marie first heard about vocations. Everything about this implies secrecy, belies this false sense of intimacy, which is totally predicated upon this fake idea of reality in Opus Dei. And I thought that that note that she applied for a passport and tasted blood oranges and gelato for the first time was so interesting, because it's as if there is this dichotomy, the bitter and the sweet, these lies and this deceit, this idea, this reality that Opus Dei tries to perpetuate that so rapidly falls apart within moments of these people committing their lives to something that they don't understand. When Anne-Marie was told that she might have a vocation, she imagined herself as a supernumerary. She could have a family and fulfill her professional dreams, but she was mistaken. A priest at Ballyglunin told her that God had given her a vocation as an assistant numerary, because of course they are the ones who assign these vocations. And it's so bizarre to me that that would be something that could persist, this idea that someone would tell you that you have a vocation rather than that being something that you discern for yourself. That goes against every other discernment process that I have ever heard of for considering joining a religious organization or order or convent. It's so incredibly unnatural, and yet time and time and time again, that is the experience that people have. And of course, it's within Opus Dei's best interest to convince the people that that is the case, because they need that free labor. The only vocation that anyone has is the one assigned to them by Opus Dei, and it's up to the individual to then sustain and maintain all that that supposed vocation implies. And if they fail in that is put on the shoulders of the individual rather than at the feet of the organization, which is where it belongs. So both Anne-Marie and Tina are pulled aside, isolated from the rest of their peers, and more or less coerced into joining an organization that they don't really understand under the guise of a vocation that they didn't even know that they had. Secrecy and forced intimacy. To me, it feels like an emotional and spiritual rape. Monica Espinoza was part of an Opus Dei administration near Buenos Aires that served several retreat venues and also a hospitality school for young girls. After Europe, Opus Dei had spread to Latin America, where post-colonial Spanish Catholic culture was particularly hospitable to Escriva's ideas. And of course, this culture is still alive and well in South America, and from everything that I am seeing, it seems to be spreading here in the US as well. Monica grew up in Bolivia, one of 10 siblings. Opportunities in her village were scarce, and in 1986, when Monica was 16, she and her sister were sent to Argentina to finish their secondary education. On the long bus journey, a woman had befriended them. She had coiffed blonde hair, like the feathery tips of the passing pampas grass. They stayed in touch, and the next year, both sisters whistled as assistant numeraries. Now, it's interesting to me that in Opus Dei, there seems to be this inculcated culture of suppressing and ignoring the sexual aspect of what makes us human, to repress that and downplay it as much as possible. And yet, these women who targeted these young girls used their sex appeal and their femininity to dazzle and bewitch these children. Because what young girl or boy is not going to be impressed or taken in by a dazzling, beautiful woman or a handsome, charismatic man? I think most people would be. That's why these kinds of people become politicians and talk show hosts and everything else. Charismatic, pretty people are attractive, and we like to look at them and talk to them and get their approval, especially when we're children. And Opus Dei knows that and uses it to their advantage. It's disgusting, and it needs to be called out. The article goes on to say that, according to Escriva's teachings, rest was dangerous. Quote, "Satan and his allies never take a holiday," he warned. "You must fight against the tendency to be too lenient with yourselves." So the girls took breaks only to eat, sleep, or pray. Not only is this just outrageously bad advice, in my opinion, but it immediately plants yet another seed of distrust in oneself. If you never stop moving, if you never take a moment to pause and take stock of your surroundings, if you're denied adequate rest, and sleep deprivation further compounds the issue, then you're never going to have an opportunity to absorb and process the environment that you're in and consider whether or not it's actually an environment that you want to consider being in. It's worth noting that sleep deprivation and this encouraged distrust of oneself and one's own thought process and critical thinking abilities are techniques that most highly controlling cults use. So that's fun. There's also all of this stuff that is implicit to being a member of Opus Dei. For example, it says here, Mass each morning, the Rosary, 2 30-minute sessions of prayer, 15 minutes of reading of religious texts, a visit to the Blessed Sacrament, as well as regular invocations and mortifications. Now, on the face of it, with the exception of the mortifications perhaps, which I take a pretty big issue with, there is nothing wrong with someone centering their life around this type of prayer and thoughtfulness, but it's so prescriptive in Opus Dei, it's so regimented, and it's so performative and rote. How is someone supposed to grow and deepen in their faith and spirituality if you're following a script for everything that you do? It just doesn't make sense, and it doesn't work. The article notes that in 1981, Cardinal Basil Hume, who was the Archbishop of Westminster, warned Opus Dei not to recruit minors and that the parents of young would-be members had had to be involved in the decision to join. He made it clear that members must be free to join or leave without undue pressure, and the organization's activities must be clearly identified. In a previous video, I read that letter that he issued and discussed his stance on Opus Dei and what he was trying to accomplish. I think he very clearly saw the forest for the trees, and it's just too bad that the steps that he started to take were not expounded upon following his death. Anne-Marie's parents had read the exposés citing former members, including a professor from the University of Oxford who spoke of having their minds and actions controlled. Of course, Opus Dei denied the claims, but soon after, Anne-Marie's father came to visit. He looked at the brown tablecloths where Anne-Marie and the other girls ate leftovers of the food they served to the other members on bone china. "God Almighty," he muttered. That's when the call started. Various relatives all ringing to tell the teenager they wanted her home for good. Throughout this story and the larger overarching evolving story of Opus Dei throughout the years and across the world, there are standout individuals who come to mind when I think of people who have stood in opposition to or attempted to hold Opus Dei responsible for the things that they have done. Bishop Hume, God rest his soul, is one of those people, and I would say that Anne-Marie's father is one of those people as well. He was an intelligent man who saw very clearly how unhealthy and toxic the environment that his daughter was in was, and the steps that he took to extricate her from that situation are nothing short of admirable. I think we could all only hope to have a parent as involved and conscientious and courageous as Anne-Marie's father. The article goes on to say that sometimes Anne-Marie had her own doubts, and one day she asked Mary McGrath, the director of Lismullen, "Miss Mary, where does all the money go?" Which is a very good question, and one that I've asked myself many, many times. McGrath looked her straight in the eye and said, "If you continue on about these materialistic things, Anne-Marie, you and your family will go to hell." Which I think is just such a cop-out thing to say and absolutely insane. Nobody has the power to condemn anyone to hell or heaven, for that matter. That is completely outside the realm of human possibility. And yet Opus Dei has no qualms about using that line to discourage people from questioning their reality or questioning the behavior of the people around them or the behavior of the organization as a whole. And yet I think that that is a question that any member of any organization should be perfectly within their right to ask. And frankly, they shouldn't have to ask. That information should be readily available, because if you are putting the majority of your income into the organization, as is the case for assistant numeraries and numeraries, you are entitled to know where that money is going. And I don't think that that kind of attitude of secrecy and gatekeeping would fly in any other organization except for a religious one. Unfortunately, in the religious context, certain things are acceptable and not given a second thought. Next, the article outlines a really chilling example of the kind of invasive control these administrations exerted over the other members. No one in this organization has the freedom to exercise their free will in any really truly meaningful way, and it's completely and totally hobbled, and the rest of the character and personhood of the individual follows suit. It says that the next time her family rang, Anne-Marie took the phone from the wall and heard the little click, indicating someone had picked up the other line in the director's office. Her father was calling from a phone box in the village. "You're to leave Opus Dei, Anne-Marie. None of this nonsense anymore," he said. "You're to come home." "But it's my vocation. It's God's will." Anne-Marie's hands were clammy. She could feel the other members quietly gathering in a semicircle in the hallway around her. Their heads were bowed in silent prayer. "You're being manipulated, Anne-Marie. You're to come home." Her father shouted, "No, Dad." Anne-Marie hung up. "You did well," her spiritual director said, touching her lightly on the shoulder. Every time I read that, I get full body chills, because the image that comes to mind is not one of an individual exercising their free will and desire to commit to something, but it's it reads like something out of an episode of American Horror Story, to be perfectly honest. This right here reads like what you would expect from any cult intent on controlling the thoughts and behaviors and actions of an individual. It's not a healthy environment, and it certainly is not one in which individuals are free to make their own choices, despite what Opus Dei might say to the contrary. Tina had been miserable since she whistled. Shortly afterwards, Montero, her glamorous confidant, ceased to acknowledge her. All she had done was given Tina a cilice, a barbed metal chain she was to tie around her thigh for 2 hours every day, and a discipline, a rope whip with knotted ends she was to use on her back when she prayed the Hail Mary. Mortifications are a part of Opus Dei's daily spiritual plan. Asceticism is a way to imitate Christ's life, to take up the cross with him. It's like, welcome to Opus Dei, now commence abusing yourself. Why? Because we said so. It's my opinion that this hyperfixation on a deity's suffering, in this case, Jesus Christ, is supremely unhealthy and a breeding ground for a host of behavioral and psychological problems, religious OCD least amongst them. Beyond that, if you are a Christian, you are supposed to believe that Jesus Christ died for your sins. And this constant hyperfixation on imitating Christ's life, up to and including being on the cross with him, is, in my opinion, just bizarre. And either way, Opus Dei, it's time to get down off the cross, because we need the wood to build houses for all the people that you abandoned after they left the organization with nothing. So maybe we should focus a little bit more on that and a little bit less on climbing up on this cross with someone who ostensibly died for you so that you wouldn't have to do that. I mean, that's been the whole point. And so it occurs to me that despite all of the pretty aesthetic language, it isn't about any type of religious or spiritual practice insofar as it is to serve as another way to beat down the individual and to hobble and restrict their identity and their freedom. The article goes on to discuss other aspects of the intense scrupulosity that exists in Opus Dei. The numeraries read everything that Tina sent or received in the mail to protect her, they said, from immoral thoughts. In confession and one-on-ones with their spiritual directors, the girls were encouraged to share and critique their innermost thoughts. Again, this is just my opinion. I'm not a psychologist, but it seems to me that it would be impossible for someone to practice this kind of intense, overt scrupulosity and come out unscathed. And it's a pretty bizarre practice if you think about it. Most spiritual guidance, Christian and otherwise, advises the individual work to associate less with that inner monologue, that inner thought process, all of the things that are coming up throughout the day and our little quirks and foibles that we're attempting to work for, and to instead turn that attention to a higher power or a higher good. And yet in Opus Dei, it's actually the exact opposite. They're like, no, don't worry about that. Focus intently on all of these perceived issues that you have, and only through that will you be able to achieve true spiritual freedom. I think it's horseshit, and it clearly does not work, or you would not have the situation that we are currently sitting in today with this organization. The article goes on to discuss the corporate works of Opus Dei, the institutions such as schools, universities, and student residences. And it states that these corporate works are not owned by Opus Dei. There is no Opus Dei Limited, but are typically set up by charities through the members. And members' employment contracts, for example, are the responsibility of the individuals or entities that run specific centers, not the religious organization itself. I feel like this is such a bullshit loophole that Opus Dei has used to avoid culpability in a number of different situations over the years. I don't feel like this would fly with any other organization, certainly not one that cared about its image. Nowhere else I think you would have an organization, say for example, let's say the Boy Scouts of America. The Boy Scouts of America is a national organization, and within that there are individual troops throughout the country that have scoutmasters and Boy Scouts as the members. It would be insane for the Boy Scouts of America to say, we're not responsible for the atrocities that have been committed to these children by predators that were attracted to this organization. That's on the individual troops themselves. They're flying under the Boy Scouts of America banner. So egg on their face is egg on Boy Scouts of America's face, and it's no different for Opus Dei, despite their protracted, constipated attempt to avoid any type of accountability. The article goes on to note that because of this disorganized organization, which is intentional, that it's almost impossible to total the worldwide value of Opus Dei's corporate works. In the UK, Antonio was able to calculate that they declare assets of more than £65 million. Escrivá himself referred to Opus Dei as a disorganized organization, and that sounds cute and trite in theory, but in practice it's a literal nightmare, particularly when you start getting into situations like this where there are legal issues at play. What I wonder in all of this is how long will Opus Dei be able to continue to deny culpability by deflecting onto these individual centers, administrations, and charities, especially when the overwhelming majority of those who are speaking out state that they were following orders while under mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual duress. How much further can this go? How much further can they push the buck? This issue extends into the fact that many of these people were not paid. For example, Monica was not paid for her work. Wages were not even discussed. It was understood that the work she did was for her Opus Dei family and it was done for free. It was understood. Lovely. Again, nowhere else, no other organization would be able to get away with this kind of thing. But for some reason, it flies here. It seems like, from everything that this article says, that the administration that Tina was in was attempting to handle this situation, but did a very poor job because they're not equipped to help people with their mental or physical health appropriately. So they shuffled her around to various different places. Eventually, she ended up in London, and it seemed like things might improve. After one attempt to flee, Tina begged and begged to study at a polytechnic on the outskirts of the city. Eventually, the director relented. But one day, when a numerary couldn't accompany her to college, Tina met a man after class for pizza. That evening, she confessed what she had done, and the next day, she was driven 4 hours north to Thornycroft Hall, a retreat center 2 miles from the nearest dwelling. Tina hit rock bottom. She tried to take her own life twice. Eventually, the numerary said there was nothing more they could do for her bad spirit. On the journey home, Tina veered between elation and terror. She thought that, having left, she could now do anything, and also that she might die in the next minute. She carried a small fabric suitcase, and in her handbag, a notebook, a passport, and an empty purse. Tina was 33, and she weighed 43 kilograms. To her mother and sister, she looked like a broken child. As she stepped off the train, they opened their arms and didn't ask any questions. Because, let's remember, that the only vocation that you have is the one that is assigned to you by Opus Dei. It is your responsibility to live up to that, whatever it may entail, and they won't tell you until it is too fucking late. And if you fail, it's on you and your bad spirit, and not because of the organization. Let that sink in. And again, ask yourself, would this fly with any other organization? I think not. And if you think that this is the only instance of someone being so severely damaged by this organization that taking their own life seemed like a better alternative than anything else, you would be mistaken. You would be mistaken. Monica and Tina both eventually made their exits in their individual ways from the organization. In Anne Marie's case, she was physically assaulted while sitting in a doctor's office by a former director attempting to drag her bodily out of there and back into Opus Dei. It says that McGrath stood and pulled on Anne Marie's arm. Anne Marie clawed at the wall. "I'm not going," she shouted. "There's people looking at you." And only then McGrath lowered her voice and sat down. And then she stiffened. "Are you thinking of leaving Opus Dei?" Because of course that is unconceivable. And note, you would not need to claw at a wall if someone was just sort of gently trying to urge you along or simply talking to you. There was a physical assault that took place here that was out of line and inappropriate. Again, would this fly in any other organization? Monica fled under the guise of visiting a sick relative and had to have money sent to her by her family so that she could pay the fare to travel. In 2015, she left Argentina for Bolivia and never came back. So, to recap all of this, Anne-Marie left and then was contacted and harassed repeatedly by Opus Dei members, assaulted by her former director in public while she was just minding her own business in a doctor's office. Tina barely left with her life and was contacted by members trying to get her to come back. And Monica is the only one in this story who does not have any mention of that, but she had to flee the country to get away from this organization. Last month, the article says, Anne-Marie, Tina, and Monica appeared in a grid of faces. The Agora Zoom call is a weekly forum to discuss Opus Dei. It was started in 2020 by former members and recently expanded to the English-speaking world through a Reddit group called Opus Dei Exposed. The group has hundreds of members. All of the accounts of the experiences from those people in the Agora chat and in the anonymous message boards on Reddit and Opus Libris and elsewhere are all chillingly similar in the accounts of the experiences that people had. And all of these allegations were put to Opus Dei's head office in Rome, and this is what their spokesperson responded with. Quote, everybody's experiences are valid, and if some people have been hurt while being in Opus Dei, we are very sorry about that. We would like to apologize and, if applicable, be able to amend and repair in the best possible way. Which sounds very empty to me, but we will get to that in a moment. In 2021, Monica and 42 other former assistant numeraries from Latin America accused Opus Dei of enslavement in Argentina, denouncing the organization in the press. The Argentinian police are investigating. Montero, and now in her 70s, said that she did not remember the specifics of Tina's situation. Quote, I treated all the girls the same, and we were all very fond of each other. Maybe because of my character and being Spanish, I expressed my fondness in a different way from the Irish women. In my opinion, this is such utter horseshit. Yes, all cultures have their differences, but predatory behavior is predatory behavior. Not being able to recognize that and blaming it on your culture is such a cop-out. And I don't think that we should let that fly. I hear that excuse given way more than I think it should be. There are behaviors that are simply wrong, no matter where you are in the world. There are things that fly in the face of human ethics and human rights, and it does not matter what culture you're a part of or how normalized that behavior might have been in your culture at one point or might be currently. That doesn't mean that it's not still wrong. Ethics and the law do not always line up perfectly. Sometimes the law is a little bit behind what is actually ethical and moral, and that's why there is an incentive placed on all of us to hold one another to a higher standard than just the lowest common denominator. And blaming something on your culture or your character should not ever fly. Montero is wrong. She knew exactly what she was doing, and I do not buy for 1 minute that she was under any kind of misguided notion as to what she was doing. She had directions from someone to go out and target vulnerable young women, to bring them in and recruit them, to traffic them into Opus Dei, to groom them into becoming assistant numeraries, to work in service of this organization for nothing. In a lengthy letter, Mary McGrath, now in her 60s, rejected several aspects of Anne-Marie's recollection. She didn't think it was possible to listen in on the girls' phone calls, for example, and disputed the types of tablecloths and flatware used in the center. Quote, the words attributed to me do not reflect my attitude to life and to people, and would not be in keeping with the overall approach I take to things. The accusation that I tried to force her to come with me is totally untrue. So 2 things. First of all, she didn't think it was possible to listen in on the girls' phone calls. So she's an idiot. Any child who grew up in the world before cell phones knows that if you had multiple landlines in one house, they were all connected to the same phone line. And if one person was on the phone, you couldn't use the phone. And if you picked up the other line, you would be able to hear their conversation. We all did it as kids. Everybody did it as kids. It's one of the oldest tricks in the book, and I do not for one second think that Mary McGrath did not know that either. She's not an idiot. She's something else entirely. Second of all, this he said, she said game between the people who are speaking out about what they said and Opus Dei's ham-fisted and maudlin response is getting so incredibly fucking tiresome. There is no incentive for these people to share these experiences. None whatsoever. There's more of an incentive to just keep quiet about it because of the retribution and the backlash that they stand to receive from the organization and anybody else who is connected to it. Anne Marie Allen, Tina Fogarty, and Monica Espinoza are not punching down by calling Opus Dei out for the things that they experience. And there is a responsibility of this organization and of the Catholic Church to do their due diligence and do the right thing. And if that's not going to be done, then it needs to be left up to the competent authorities who will. So that is the Opus Dei Diaries in a very condensed nutshell. Again, if you have not read this thing in its entirety, please do so. There is so much information in here. The testimonies are so incredibly compelling, and how you could doubt anyone after reading this is just completely and totally beyond me. But doubt they do, and it is persistent nonetheless. So next we will be moving on to the Q&A about the Financial Times article, which was a little blurb that Opus Dei put up on its website, opusdei.org. There are 18 questions and answers in this little article, and it's intended to comprehensively refute the Financial Times article. I'll leave it up to the judgment of you, the audience, to determine whether or not you think that this does that. I have my own opinion, and I think it will become quite clear. So the first question in this article, which was published on March 26th, 2024, what is Opus Dei's response to the article? They say, our main concern is to listen and establish channels for dialogue so we can understand each individual's experience clearly. To do this, Opus Dei has set up healing and resolution protocols in places where there are people who need to express their complaints. This system has been in place for a year in some countries. This system has been very positive for some of the women who made complaints a few years ago. We were able to resolve individual conflicts and rebuild our relationships with them. So, this system was put in place a year ago, but it also helped some women several years ago. The timeline, the math isn't mathing. Also, if they were able to so successfully resolve these other previous alleged conflicts, where are they? Show me the money. Surely, if these people are feeling so much peace in their heart and there's such a positive resolution to whatever their problems were, surely Opus Dei would be eager to present some type of proof of that. This would be the time to do it if they were going to do it at all, and yet the second question, does this readiness to listen imply that Opus Dei accepts all accusations? The process of listening and healing doesn't mean that Opus Dei accepts all the accusations made in the media. There are some accusations that we know are unjust and categorically reject. In Opus Dei, there has never been ill-informed or forced recruitment or people reduced to servitude. Really? You sure about that? Question 3. Apart from those specific accusations, does Opus Dei admit making mistakes? They give a real long, drawn-out little response here. The long and short of it is the answer is no. We recognize that people making complaints can have suffered negative personal experiences. I don't know who's editing this, if anyone is editing it, but I cannot tell you how many times I find typos in Opus Dei articles from Opus Dei's website. We recognize that people making complaints can have suffered negative personal experiences. Tell me you rushed to get something out because you are fucking panicking without telling me that you rushed to get something out because you are fucking panicking. Opus Dei will not tire of asking for their forgiveness or of trying to help each individual. Please explain. How are you going to help? What exactly are you going to do? Lay it out in the black and white so that we can all be on the same page. You're so eager to save face and set the record straight, so set the record straight. It's not that hard. Either you have a plan and a protocol in place that you can clearly explain, or you do not. Question 4. How old does someone have to be to join Opus Dei? People can only join Opus Dei when they reach the age of majority. The statutes of the Opus Dei prelature make this perfectly clear. Nobody under the age of 18 can join it. Now, what they conveniently neglect to mention is that Opus Dei does allow people to ask for admission at 14 and a half years of age to be fully admitted at 16. Allegedly, this is only allowed in rare special circumstances, but much like a certain hot button topic here in the United States that was touted as being safe, legal, and rare, but which was none of those things, how legal and rare do we think it is that people are only being admitted at 14 and a half under special circumstances? I may have been born at night, but I was not born last night. And I am not that stupid. And I hope that none of you are that stupid either, because Opus Dei thinks you are. Jumping ahead to question 6. Do assistant numeraries get paid for their work? Yes, they do. Most members of Opus Dei have jobs that are not connected with Opus Dei, such as teachers, doctors, lawyers, artists, carpenters, and so on. Yes, they lead such full, beautiful, vibrant lives. But according to numerous former members, they are paid well below the minimum wage while in Opus Dei. And allegedly this has been done for tax reasons, but we may never know the truth. Question 7. Some assistant numeraries have said that in the past they weren't paid for their work. Is that possible? Again, another big old long drawn out paragraph, word salad, and so far not a single statement expressing explicit awareness of and remorse for the crimes that have been permitted to thrive. They say that the mindset of a vocational life in the church led in the past to a family-style approach of doing things, which is their way of excusing the fact that people have not been paid. How do you treat your family? With the passage of time, it became clear that people needed to have their jobs clearly defined and not just subsumed into their vocation. Gee, ya don't say. From the early 1990s onward, considerable efforts have been made to change this. What exactly are those efforts? Please lay it out for us in the black and white. It's not that hard. It shouldn't be that difficult. If the protocols are in place, if things have been amended, and it's been done so recently, I mean, that's well within the internet age. You should have electronic documentation of all of this. If it is that important and you are taking it that seriously and it is that authentic, I need to be convinced. The onus is not on us to present the evidence, it is on the organization. In Rome, a system has been established for people who used to be members to present complaints or claims, and all the countries have been instructed to set up a complaints office. So how can someone no longer in the work take advantage of this system? Because all that they supply is an email address that goes to someone who is a member of Opus Dei, who is supposed to be intercepting and dealing with and resolving all of these issues through their listening and healing protocol. One single email address, and that's it. That's it. Do assistant numeraries have to hand in their own earnings to Opus Dei? Each assistant numerary is paid normally by bank transfer, and she has control over what she does with her salary. And then more word salad. This statement does not reflect the testimony of former members. One of these things is not like the other. And again, the onus is on the organization to provide the documentation backing up the claims that they are making. And if you have been doing things properly, there should be ample documentation for you to do that. Financial statements, tax documents, something, a receipt. Question 9. What is the discernment process for joining Opus Dei? Is it possible that some members may not have been fully informed about their vocation? People ask to join Opus Dei of their own free will, and they can only join after reaching the age of 18, which we already just discussed. Question 10. Some former assistant numeraries have said that years ago they followed a different lifestyle from other Opus Dei members. Is that true? The Opus Dei prelature is aware that in the past, in some countries, distinctions were made. It's systemic, and they know it. And it does not matter what they say to the contrary, because until they can provide documentation proving and backing up their claims, it's all just hot air coming out of their ass. And I don't have the time for it. And I don't think any of you do either. Question 11. Others have said that when they left Opus Dei, there were people who tried to convince them that they shouldn't. Could that have happened? They say, any form of pressure is alien to the spirit of Opus Dei. Not a word in this response concerning the very active role that people in Opus Dei take towards fomenting this vocational crisis in people, specifically in young people, and the controlling environment that is encouraged in these institutions. Possibly, in some cases, someone wanted to help or to support them in the vocational commitment they had formerly lived out fully and happily, but it was never given freely. That is so incredibly clear from looking at these stories, not only in this article, but in all of the other stuff that we have gone over here. Everything does not inspire confidence, and it does not create the impression of a group of people who are freely and enthusiastically consenting to participating in this organization in the way that they end up having to participate in it. They go on to say, if these people have been through negative experiences, Opus Dei wants to listen to them, which is why we've set up a formal process of listening and resolution for people who have belonged to Opus Dei. So are we supposed to just ignore or blindly accept the fact that people who have expressed a desire to leave are questioned about their mental health and or put on psychotropic drugs to curb their desire for freedom? That's something that has been recounted by numerous people over the years. The fact that there is a high percentage of people within Opus Dei who are on psychotropic drugs is something that has been discussed at length, both in the international institutional complaint that was levied against Opus Dei last year, in the accounts from former members on Opus Libris and Odan and Opus Dei Exposed, and in this article. I wonder how many people in Opus Dei are wandering around in a drug-induced haze, barely even aware of their identity. And to not recognize the intense human rights violation that poses is a massive mistake. These are actions and decisions that have far-reaching consequences, not just on the individual members' lives, but on the lives of the people that they will interact with in the future, on the quality of life that they could ever hope to have going forward. It could kill someone. It is not something to be taken lightly. Question 12. The article mentions that other former Opus Dei members who were not assistant numeraries have criticized it on certain websites. What is Opus Dei's position towards this? I feel like a sort of warm glow. Certain websites. I can't help but feel that an Opus Dei Exposed, along with Opus Libris and the other anonymous communities, are being referenced here in the subtext. I hope that there are people in this organization that are sweating. I hope there are people that are getting very nervous. I also think it's interesting that there's no mention of the lawsuits, of which there have been more than one, and we will discuss one very relevant example here in a moment. But I guess that makes sense from a legal perspective. But again, if your organization is on the chopping block for literal human trafficking and fraud, an ounce of humility goes a long way. And this tells me that not only does the organization not think that they are wrong, but that they are not sorry, and they do not care, and they have no intention of ever righting any wrong. Again, they have stated internally the organization will persist with the intention of recovering. And essentially, according to very recent documentation, they are just waiting for the current pope to die off and to seize the moment to try to replace him with somebody who's a little bit more favorable to the organization, who will see things from their point of view. Question 13. What happens when someone leaves Opus Dei? Efforts are made to ensure that they leave with realistic job prospects and that they have what they need, both in terms of money and personal accompaniment. Has this always been true? When was this put into practice? We need way more information. Can Opus Dei present either a former assistant numerary to confirm this, or a paper trail to the same effect? Again, there's no documentation here, and that would help them out a whole lot if they had it, but I kind of don't think they do. Question 14. What are catering colleges or hospitality training centers? Answer. They are socio-educational projects aiming to work in particularly vulnerable sectors of society to help young women continue their secondary education. So, what type of nationally recognized certification do these women earn? Is indentured servitude to Opus Dei not the end goal by these women being enrolled in these programs? Not only that, but does Opus Dei make a habit of proselytizing and recruiting from vulnerable sectors of society as a rule, or is this reserved specifically for the servant class of people that they need to clean their floors and scrub their toilets and wipe their asses? Additionally, why are these catering colleges and hospitality training centers women only? Surely there are men in these communities as well who would benefit from a program like this and who might enjoy that type of work, assuming that they are being trained properly and accredited for their education and paid for their labor. Why is it women only? Why the strict gendered focus? I'm asking Opus Dei. I know the answer. And I would guess most of you watching this, if you are familiar with this organization, know the answer. But I would like to hear it from the horse's mouth. Why is there no similar program for men? Question 15. In 2021, a group of women made some accusations in the media against the Opus Dei prelature in Argentina. What is Opus Dei's response to these claims? The accusations were made against Opus Dei in different media outlets about the employment and personal situations of a group of women. This is hardly the first time that someone has used media to raise the alarm about Opus Dei practices. It's as if they would like to pretend that this Financial Times article and the article in the AP about the 43 women in Argentina are the only two times that this has ever happened. It's so weird. So weird. We can't figure out why it's happening. What's going on? It's so strange. We just don't get it. Opus Dei responded by opening up channels for listening and dialogue. Opus Dei would have us, John Q. Public, believe that these wrongs, not paying people, not being honest about what life as an assistant numerary is actually like, hounding people when they leave, trying to drag them bodily back into the service, were just random one-off clerical errors and irregularities, rather than a systemic, institutionalized problem that is being perpetuated by the atmosphere and culture that is inculcated inside of this organization. Opus Dei apologized to them sincerely and asked for their forgiveness and applied remedial measures as appropriate. Today, our relationship with these women is positive. Again, they're talking about these people that they allegedly used their listening and healing protocol to resolve these problems with. Again, they're referring to these people without a shred of proof, without a single document or individual willing to come forward and say, yeah, that's true. Surely if the relationship was so positive, it would not be that hard to present a former member willing to say as much. And yet, again, crickets. They say that accusations made in the media by some of the women and their representatives of recruitment and servitude are totally false. So it's one of two things. Either Opus Dei is being truthful and thousands of people are experiencing group psychosis and deciding to just make shit up to come after this organization, or the reality is that these training centers serve as a rotating door of new recruitment opportunities from a disadvantaged sector of society, and it is, in my opinion, clearly the latter. And it was an intentional, premeditated decision made in the earliest days of the organization's founding. Question 18. People have criticized the fact that corporate works do not include Opus Dei in their names. Why is that? Answer. It isn't Opus Dei's responsibility. The Opus Dei prelature is solely concerned with their Christian orientation and formation. So a couple of things. One, if this is true, why is the Opus Dei presence in these so-called corporate works so significant? Those who have been in these positions in these corporate works and then left and talked about their experiences have acknowledged that they were encouraged to do so, to be involved in these corporate works by the directors in their administrations. No one in Opus Dei makes a decision, personal or professional, in a vacuum without someone else being in their ear. And to think that they can, to think that they are acting altruistically, independently, would be to ignore the overwhelming body of evidence to the contrary. Again, how stupid do they think we are? Furthermore, if Opus Dei is so disinterested and disconnected from these corporate works, why is it so necessary to disclose the Opus Dei affiliation on these secular organizations' websites? If it didn't matter, it wouldn't matter. But clearly it does. All signs point that it does, and that there is a reason for it. So what is the real reason? I mean, I think I know what the reason is, but I want to hear it again from them. So that is the Q&A about the Financial Times article. I will leave this linked down below in case you want to read through it all, because I didn't go through all of the questions in here. It kind of gave me a headache just going through what I did. Nothing that they said is surprising, really. I would expect nothing less from an organization that has demonstrated zero desire to rectify or change or fix or do anything positive or beneficial for these people. So, you know, there is that. But I thought that it would be good to go over that a little bit, just so that everybody can kind of get the pulse for what Opus Dei is saying versus what these people are saying. It's like listening to two different versions. I mean, it's two different versions of reality. It's two totally different conversations. It's like Opus Dei does not even live in the same like realm as the rest of us. I don't know where they are, but wherever it is significantly less problematic than it actually is here for all of us living on planet Earth, having to contend with the decisions that they make, for their victims who have to try to put the shreds of their lives back together once they wake up to the reality of what it is that they've become entrapped in. They mention here in several points that no one is allowed to join Opus Dei until they are 18 years of age. And we know from listening to the testimonies of former members and from the journalistic endeavors from people like Antonia, people like me, and everybody else, that that's not true. But there was a poll that was put on Opus Dei Exposed a little while back that asked former members how old they were when they joined. Now, the sample size for this survey is incredibly small. At this point in time, there are 450 some odd members on Opus Dei Exposed. So it is a very, very small sample size. But I do think that since it is mostly made up of former members, it is pretty indicative of the overall situation in Opus Dei as a whole. And according to the survey, the vast majority of respondents were 14.5 to 16 years of age when they joined. That directly refutes what Opus Dei tries to say time and time again. Along the same vein of refuting things, Opus Dei also launched a information in context site that is intended to refute point by point all of these same facts, and I will leave that linked down below as well so that you can go and look at it, but it's more of the same that we just went over. And then last but not least, for Opus Dei's response, in an effort to put a cap on this as much as they possibly can, they decided to release what is intended to be a letter written by assistant numeraries of Opus Dei from all over the world and signed by them. I will leave it linked below so that you can read the entirety of it. The first paragraph, though, states that we, assistant numeraries of Opus Dei from all over the world, are signing this letter. We have decided to write this letter because last year the testimonies of 43 women, many of them assistant numeraries, were published. We have been hurt by the negative experiences they have recounted, and although we do not see ourselves in all of them, we believe that they need to be heard in order to heal their wounds. They conclude by saying, "We do not ask everyone to understand or share it, nor do we ask them to choose our way of life. We simply ask that we be respected, that the importance of a vocation that we live with love and commitment should not be underestimated, and that it should have the same dignity as any other vocational choice." What I think is so interesting about this is that it's attempting to subvert the narrative of this entire situation. It's attempting to subvert the truth and twist things, twist the perception, and turn this into a witch hunt of media coming after assistant numeraries within Opus Dei. They say that they want that their life choice be respected. I am asking for the same thing. If you have an individual who is genuinely willing to commit the rest of their life to servitude to an organization that choice should be respected and treated with dignity, because that is a sacrifice and it should not be seen as anything other than that. They deserve the respect and dignity that is extended to any human being, and they deserve to be paid for the labor that they are rendering. Any less than that is simply insufficient. The weird thing about this Respect Our Voices and Choices article, or Voices and Story, is that there are thousands of names typed in here, the names of these alleged numerary assistants who want their choice to be respected, and not a single signature. It says that they signed it, but it's not a signature. It's not even a digital signature. It's just a bunch of typed names. And allegedly, rumor has it that at least one of the women whose name appears on this document has since left the organization and is not in good standing with them. So was her choice respected? Was her story respected? Was she allowed to leave in good standing? Because it doesn't really sound like it. So that wraps up this segment about Opus Dei's response to the whole thing. So the third thing that I wanted to look at in this video was whether or not there is legal precedent in place to hold Opus Dei responsible, whether or not there is any type of legal anything that could be used to bring some type of suit against Opus Dei or against these individuals in Opus Dei who perpetrated these abuses. And as it so happens, there is, and it's a pretty interesting situation. Someone was kind enough to post a breakdown in a few different parts of this case on Opus Dei Exposed, and I will leave a link to those down below so that you can go and read through them. But I'll read through the brief synopsis of it here. This case occurred in France, so there is an English translation of the final decision, and they linked the original court judgment as well, which is in French. So this has become known as the Catherine Tissier case, and Opus Dei was convicted in 2016 of labor law breaches regarding 99 young domestic workers, including Catherine Tissier. And you probably didn't hear anything about this. And if you go and try to find any information about it online, it's really, really difficult to do. It seems like Opus Dei has tried to bury this story as much as they possibly can, to bury this case as much as they possibly can. I have to imagine that this kind of makes them sweat a little bit. In 2016, Catherine won compensation and the final appeal in this case, and the Opus Dei association she worked for and 2 managers were fined for breaches of labor law relating to 100 women. Catherine joined Opus Dei in 1986 at the age of 16, being attracted through the hospitality training courses at Daznan. She worked mainly in Couvrelles. I don't know French, so if I mispronounce any of these names or places, I apologize. French is not my cup of tea. But she worked at an Opus Dei conference center in Paris and at Garnelles, another center, until 2000 when she left Opus Dei. Catherine started her legal claim in 2001 against ACUT, the Opus Dei employer, and 2 numeraries managing her, and the French judicial authorities started a parallel criminal investigation into breaches of labor law. The main charges were concealing from the authorities the employment of almost 100 women, over half of whom were minors, and non- or underpayment of their wages. The court hearings dealt with both the criminal charges and Catherine's claims for compensation. The first judgment was handed down on November 24, 2011. All charges and claims were dismissed, and Opus Dei was initially vindicated. The second judgment and the first appeal was on March 26, 2013. This overturned the first decision, except that Catherine's compensations was limited to the 3 years before she started her claim. She was out of time procedurally for the period before that. This judgment is available and linked here in French. The third judgment and the second appeal was dated January 20th, 2015. This reversed the first appeal and vindicated Opus Dei again. You cannot find this judgment online. The fourth judgment and third appeal was dated July 27th. This reversed the second appeal, convicted Opus Dei defendants, and awarded compensation to Catherine. And we will go over those details in a moment. The author of this post goes on to say that they wanted to be sure that there was no further hearing, and they searched online without any success. They checked Opus Dei's own website, and the French version has a summary of the whole process. And at the end of the timeline, there are 2 lines that are translated from French. The first says, July 27th, 7th, 2016, the Court of Appeal of Amiens convicted and fined 2 managers of the school for concealed employment because of work done voluntarily. They add the note that, in fact, the judgment also fined the Opus Dei organization. It wasn't just these 2 people. It was the organization as a whole that was held responsible for this. And so this is important because it provides an example of a legal case where Opus Dei was not able to just pass the buck and say, oh, it's not our responsibility, it's on these people. There is precedent here for holding the organization responsible. I think we can safely say that this further appeal was not pursued and that Catherine ended the whole court process victorious and that Opus Dei paid the fines to the French authorities. It's also worth highlighting what you can find if you search for Tissier and Opus Dei websites. I checked the English, Spanish, and German versions, and the only press release dates back to 2011, emphasizing Opus Dei's position and its initial victory. It is only the French section that has the timeline and a brief report of the later court defeats in the page I linked to. Even then, most of the other French articles relate to Opus Dei's initial victory in 2011. I searched on Bing for Catherine Tissier Opus Dei. The top article was from the Opus Dei website in November 2011 with the headline, French court completely absolves Daznan school. On Google, the 2 top search results are again from November 2011. The first one is from the Opus Dei website, quote, confusion about a court case in France, end quote, and the second is from Bishop Accountability, a website reporting Catherine's initial defeat. Scanning through the search results, you can find references to the 2013 appeal victory from French sources, but I couldn't see anything about the final 2016 result, except in the Opus info page where I found the original court judgment. Overall, it is very hard to work out from the internet that Opus Dei lost this court case. If you spent only a few minutes searching online, you would think that they had won it. Opus Dei's press offices put a lot of effort into press releases relating to this initial 2011 hearing and very little into subsequent developments. And why do we think that that is? Could it be that they have no desire to admit defeat in this situation because it paints them in a very bad light and also opens them up for further accountability down the road? I would speculate that that's a definite possibility. And I think that this case is really, really important. In 2016, the appeal court in France made these decisions: that there was criminal failure to declare the employment status of 31 Daznan students, including Catherine, by ACUT, the Opus Dei body that ran Daznan Catering School, and 2 managers who were female numeraries. That there was criminal failure to make Social Security payments and to pay a level of remuneration contrary to dignity to these women, and criminal misrepresentation on the pay slips of 5 employees of Daznan of the number of hours worked, i.e. underreporting the hours worked. 2 managers each had to pay a fine of 2,000 euros. ACUT had to pay a fine of 30,000 euros. They also had to pay Catherine Tissier 6,918 euros for missed salary, 20,000 euros for moral and psychological damage, 12,000 euros in legal costs. And so in total, Opus Dei defendants had to pay around 73,000 euros for this case, as well as their own legal costs. This is significant, and I hope that it can be used in some positive way to help all of these people who are beginning to come out and demand justice and fair treatment from an organization that denied that to them for far too long. In keeping with that vein, I want to begin to wrap up this video with some statements that were made by former members, people who have stuck their neck out and spoken candidly about the things that they experienced. One of these individuals is Eileen Johnson, who is a woman that I have spoken about on this channel in the past. She was one of the first former members that I found who had spoken out about the things that she had experienced. I found an interview that featured her discussing her experience within the organization, and it was incredibly compelling. So if you are interested in seeing that video, I will leave that linked up above or down below in some way, because it's a really, really interesting story and again reconfirms everything. But she released a statement following the Financial Times article, and I want to read it here. It's brief, but it is resounding. She says that the Financial Times published my letter this weekend, although not in the European edition, commenting on its article by Antonia Cundy of April 16th, in the name of the Father. In addition to editing the letter, they changed a word that I consider important. They replaced dead with traitor. I am going to protest. I include here a translation of my entire letter. The treatment of the 3 brave women interviewed by Antonia Cundy was systematic for many years, organized by the already canonized Jose Maria Escrivá, founder of Opus Dei, and his assistants. As a member of the Opus Dei Women's Section Advisory in London in the 1960s, I read Escrivá's instructions that anyone who left the work had to be considered dead, and that he would not give 5 cents for his soul. These words, plus the exploitation of our little sisters, the servants, scandalized me. So I wanted to get out of Opus Dei. However, I continued for 4 more years in drug treatments administered by Opus Dei personnel. I was one of many people treated like this. These unethical procedures are another topic that should be thoroughly investigated. Opus Dei and the church that protects it must confess its systematic abuses and its lies, largely rooted in the teachings of its holy founder, still idolized by the organization. Escrivá said that his purpose was to recruit the aristocracy of blood, money, and talent. In fact, he and his followers captured many great people, especially the auxiliary numeraries, so necessary to support his plans. And they were subjected to brainwashing so that individual ideas and initiatives were suppressed and in some cases severely punished. In the work of God, the Spirit is to obey or to leave. Words of Escrivá and Álvaro del Portillo. So the current offenders of Opus Dei live with an inheritance, the sins of their predecessors, and in particular the sins of their holy founder. Truth and justice demand that Opus Dei compensate all former members whose wages and pensions were not paid, in addition to paying for the many hours of psychological treatment that so many of us have needed. Signed, Eileen Johnson. I wanted to read her statement here so that it can live on right next to all of these other accounts and serve as a counterbalance to the poison and the lies that Opus Dei is attempting to sow to discredit these individuals. But this is not the only statement that has been made. There was another one that was published on Friday, April 26th, 2024, and I'll read through it now as well. It's from a group of independent Irish former assistant numeraries of Opus Dei, and they say that we are acting independently and do not claim to represent a wider whole. This is our statement in response to the press releases of Opus Dei regarding the following recent interviews with Irish ex-assistant numeraries. Opus Dei's responses are not an apology. We are not aware of any case where Opus Dei has issued an apology to a specific ex-member for a specific wrong. We believe that Opus Dei would find that too difficult, but are willing to be proven wrong on this. We note that Opus Dei categorically denies the allegations of exploitation. Anne-Marie, Tina, and Margaret have provided substantial, consistent evidence on national media outlets of this exploitation. Opus Dei stated publicly that it is in contact with Margaret Joyce's family. In our view, saying this in a press release was not necessary, relevant, or conducive to the building of the trust needed for dialogue. We cannot imagine how this would be acceptable under any professional safeguarding procedure. We call on Opus Dei not to use family connections as ways to approach Margaret or any other ex-member to discuss their complaints about their treatment while in Opus Dei. We call on Opus Dei to avoid making any mentions of contact with family in any future press release of this nature. Opus Dei has referenced its complaints protocol. The protocol is not a protocol. It contains an email address run by Opus Dei for complaints to be sent to it privately, and a statement to the effect that Opus Dei will investigate complaints internally as it sees fit. That is it. There is no named person, no detail of how complaints will be handled, no appeal mechanism, no information on who within Opus Dei will see the complaint, and no reference to collaboration with any part of the wider Roman Catholic Church to which Opus Dei belongs and is accountable. Many Irish Catholic institutions have implemented comprehensive safeguarding policies in recent decades. Opus Dei's protocol suggests to us that it may have no knowledge of this, and even that it may have isolated itself completely from this process in the wider church. Opus Dei needs to respond to this. Furthermore, Tina, Margaret, and Anne-Marie complained in detail in public. There is no further need for Opus Dei to wait until they are willing to engage privately with Opus Dei on the same issues. This is an excuse for an action and an unfair imposition on Tina, Anne-Marie, and Margaret. Opus Dei has gone on to invite the women to make a private complaint under its protocol, despite making it clear that they cannot be upheld if they relate to exploitation. Opus Dei has categorically denied the allegations of exploitation, in their own words, and so there seems to be little point in any of the women or anyone else making such a complaint through its protocol. We are not experts in safeguarding procedures, but it seems to us that a complaint of exploitation or abuse by an institution cannot and should not be handled internally and exclusively by that same institution. Opus Dei's categorical denial of any exploitation before any complaint has been received via its protocol proves this to us. We would like to remind Opus Dei that the Roman Catholic Church has a long and painful history of internally ignoring and hushing up allegations of abuse. The Church has progressed to some extent, and its organizations have adopted safeguarding and complaints procedures that involve external accountability. We call on the Vatican to take over Opus Dei's complaints procedure wholesale and to force Opus Dei to face up to its historical and current responsibilities meaningfully in a similar way to dioceses and other Catholic institutions. Opus Dei has not, to our knowledge, provided any meaningful public detail as to the steps it has taken to ensure that such labor offenses will not be repeated, whether in France or elsewhere. Given its irregular approach to dealing with safeguarding complaints in 2024, we are doubtful that it has adopted a rigorous professional approach to all employment issues worldwide since the French case. Whatever the formal legal requirements for admission to Opus Dei, the reality is that the vast majority of Opus Dei members were not psychologically free when they joined because of the emotional pressure and spiritual abuse by members of Opus Dei. This has been documented widely for decades, including by experts and witnesses in the French legal case referenced above. We believe that Opus Dei is incapable of engaging meaningfully on this issue without the help of the wider Catholic Church. This is because many of its senior members are both victims of psychological pressure and perpetrators. We do not expect to see eye to eye with Opus Dei on this issue. We call upon the Catholic Church to take action on this and handle complaints against Opus Dei of coercion and psychological pressure. And as if all of this wasn't enough, as if all of this doesn't present a strong enough case and should serve as a strong enough impetus for the correct authorities to take action in this situation, I wanted there to be an opportunity in this video for Anne-Marie Allen and Tina Fogarty to share their perspective following all of this that has come out after this Financial Times article. I'm fortunate enough to be in contact with these women, fortunate enough to have spoken with them. I feel galvanized by the fact that they are sharing their experiences and being so incredibly brave, and I want to amplify their voices as much as I possibly can, because they deserve to be heard louder than Opus Dei. So, in keeping with that, this is what Anne-Marie had to say. Since the Financial Times article came out on March 16th, 2024, talking about our time as assistant numeraries in Opus Dei, many people have reached out to us. They've shared their stories about Opus Dei, either about themselves or their family members. Most of these people were between 15 and 18 years old when they first got involved with Opus Dei. They all said they had bad experiences that affected them afterward. They joined Opus Dei through kids' clubs and schools for hospitality. It's becoming clear that Opus Dei focuses a lot on recruiting people under 18. It appears that Opus Dei believes it's okay to pressure, control, and involve children for their own reasons. They call it ministry, but it's actually child abuse. An investigation into the abuse by Opus Dei is necessary, and they should be forbidden from interacting with children going forward. Opus Dei should only engage with people who are 18 years old or older in all their activities. Given the alarming stories shared by those who have spoken out both before and after the Financial Times article, it's vital that we keep shedding light on these abuses. This is important to support those who haven't spoken out yet and to stop similar abuses from happening again. Tina said, Opus Dei recruited us as minors, using the usual cult tactics of love bombing, coercive control, and isolation from families, gaslighting us into believing we were the problem. Now they are still very involved in recruiting minors, but through cutesy cooking classes and fun craft activities. Since the article and subsequent radio coverage, some people have bravely come forward, but there are many who still fear Opus Dei and their dirty tricks. They still feel controlled by them. It took me 30 years to come forward due to the fear and the belief that nothing could be done about it because they were so powerful. I'm not afraid anymore. People should know that we were the lowest in rank, treated as if we were stupid and incapable of rational thought. We, the forgotten, hold the ability to do Opus Dei the most damage. People should know that when we speak, Opus Dei loses its power. And so, for my part in all of this, this is what I will conclude with. But it seems to me that although the Catholic Church claims to be a bastion of human rights, extending that respect even to the preborn, it has occurred to me that in this particular situation, its lack of expedient action for the victims and survivors of Opus Dei, and its relative silence, even in the face of such damning testimonies as these and all of the others that I have discussed, demonstrates a concerning lack of commitment and fortitude. The Church has a duty and a responsibility, even be it a self-imposed one, to act on this and every other instance of religious oppression and spiritual, emotional, physical, sexual, and financial abuse that has occurred within its ranks. Until such action is clearly and definitively taken, I consider the Roman Catholic Church, the Pope, and all other members of religious leadership in the Church guilty on all of the charges currently being leveled against Opus Dei, and I will hold no quarter for them. Better that a millstone be tied around their neck and they be tossed into the pit of hell than they cause another little one to stumble. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this episode. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your support. Please extend that support in any way that you can to the women of this situation. There was an initiative started by a former numerary, and it was made public on Opus Dei Exposed. It was a GoFundMe designed to raise money to try to give back to some of these women in some way. It was a voluntary decision that a group of former numeraries decided to spearhead. It's not something mandatory for anyone to participate in, but I will leave a link for that post down below. And if you are interested in being involved in something like that in the future, if you are interested in helping these women in some monetary way in the future, then that will provide you the avenue to do that if you so wish. Something needs to be done. Something needs to give. This cannot continue on as it has. It has reached and surpassed a breaking point. If you'd like to reach out to me, my contact information is listed down below. If you're interested in connecting with me on social media, all of that is listed down below as well. This is a totally independent and self-funded endeavor, so any support that you feel like providing is much appreciated. This is a situation that does not just concern these individuals. This is a situation that has a spillover effect into our society at large. And the question that you should be asking yourself right now is, what kind of society do I want to live in? Do I want to live in a society that allows the continued oppression of people or not? And what action am I going to take to be a part of the change that I want to see in the world? Because it is up to each and every one of us to hold each other accountable and to create the kind of world that we want to live in. So, with all of that being said, thank you for your time today. Thank you for being here. And remember, nolite te bastardes carborundorum.